I mean, they're probably freaking out, especially what happened after it. They're used to the Biden people just being like, okay, you can shoot into Russia, but only 200 yards. And then the next month be like, now 300 yards. But
all right, well,
right.
let's do whatever.
Okay. All right, sure. We'll just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, this is a whole new thing. So arguably the most important thing that came out of that hearing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump says he's going to get us a deal on day one, so we've
That's
only
right.
got a few more days of
He's got 4 days.
This war.
Listen, Steve Witkoff, get your ass on a plane to Moscow. He is our new Avril Harriman, who was this rich banker. He was the FDR's ambassador to Moscow during World War II. He was an excellent diplomat, by the way. So, yes, listen, Steve, get over there, man. We need you.
I mean, part of what you say, though, does underscore the difficulty at this point of trying to bring this war to some sort of conclusion, because while with Israel we have all the leverage in the world, just requires the willpower to actually use it. With Russia, we don't have as much. I mean,
but with Ukraine, we've got total.
With Ukraine, we do, but you have to get the Russians to come to the table as well. So it is a tricky situation. And Rubio, constitutionally, like, he is a hawk, and especially with regards to anywhere in Latin America, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I think there's almost a beltway-wide recognition, whether they want to admit it or not, that like what Rubio said is just obviously manifestly true. They're not going to be able to retake all of the. I mean, they were talking about Pelosi saying, or we're 100% going to get back Crimea.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
It's crazy.
That's not happening. So it's nice to hear at least a little bit of realism here from Rubio. We'll see how it actually plays out in practice and the means that Trump uses. He's a wild card in order to try to secure some sort of an end to the conflict if he decides to go in that direction. It was interesting. It's so interesting watching Washington work. Like, Rubio is basically, I mean, he is effectively a neocon. He's a hawkish guy. There's always has been, right? That is his ideological direction. The fact that he gets put in as Secretary of State is really antithetical to the idea that the Trump administration is going to be oriented in this anti-war kind of a way. And so you would think, like, if it was you or I questioning, it would be contentious. But because Rubio is one of them, it's relatively it's very cordial. The Washington Post endorsed him.
Right.
They're like, oh, he's one of us. He passes their respectability threshold. So it's a much different approach to him. I did think there was an interesting line of questioning taken by Senator Chris Murphy. He's emerged as a kind of an interesting voice here in the emerging second Trump term, where he really pressed Rubio on Trump's corruption and the fact that, and this is a very important line of argument, Trump has these business deals all around the world, but in particular, he has massive, and Kushner have massive financial interests in the Middle East and with the Gulf Arab states. Trump, we don't even know how much money he's getting from this freaking Saudi Live Gulf tour. They're going to have another event at one of his properties. That's just one example. Kushner got, $2 billion from the Saudis. There are all kinds of financial entanglements there. And, when you've got a president who the largest sphere of influence that a president has is in terms of foreign policy, you have to ask the question, how are these financial entanglements impacting their views and their approach to foreign policy? Is this just about American interests, or is this about your business interests as well? Chris Murphy made this point and pressed Senator Rubio on exactly this direction. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that.
Over the last 8 years, while he was in office, and since he's been out of office, he and his family have become more deeply dependent on revenue from governments in the Middle East. During his last presidency, Middle East interests sent about $10 million to Trump properties. After he left office, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was his primary Middle East envoy, was handed $2 billion in investment by the Saudis, even though a Saudi investment board said the investment was a bad business decision. That investment actually comes up for renewal in 2026, giving the Saudis massive leverage over the Trump family. And then to make matters worse, right after the election, the Trump organization said that in this term, the president-elect's second term, it would drop its previous prohibition on doing new deals in the Middle East with private foreign companies aligned with foreign governments. So the Trump organization is going to be signing new business deals in the Middle East with private companies that have connections to foreign governments at the very moment that you are going to be conducting sensitive diplomacy in these countries. That's just extraordinary. Never before in the history of this country has a president been, literally receiving cash from foreign governments and from foreign companies that are backed by foreign governments in the middle of their term. If you or I had done this as senators, we would be in violent violation of Senate ethics rule. Do you have an issue, or will you raise an issue with the president about his growing financial connection with the governments that you're going to be negotiating with?
Well, first of all, I am not neither authorized nor in any position to give you sort of any insights into any of these arrangements you've pointed out. You mentioned Jared Kushner as an example. He's a private citizen, happens to be a Floridian. I don't know what, if any, engagement he has in the work that's going on now. I can tell you what I know. Obviously, I'm not in the State Department yet, but I can tell you as an example, the president's envoy to that region, who was charged, Steve Witkoff, who was charged with being an envoy towards reaching an accommodation between the Israelis and the Saudis, has been working cooperatively and together with the Biden administration. And in fact, I dare to say that all involved deserve credit for the ceasefire that the chairman's just announced. But Steve Witkoff's been a critical component of it, and he has been involved in it from day one. I think the broader consideration about whether we want to see a Saudi-Israeli mutual recognition and relationship would be one of the most historic developments in the history of the region. And they have a right to be in the business. That's the business that they're in. They're in the real estate business. They've been for a very long time, both domestically and abroad. They have properties in multiple countries. So at the end of the day, I don't know, his family is entitled to continue to operate their business. The fundamental question is not whether his family is involved in business. The fundamental question is whether that is in any way impacting the conduct of our foreign policy in a way that's counter to our national interest. And the president's made abundantly clear that every decision he makes and every decision we are to make at the State Department should be driven by whether or not it serves the core national interests of the United States.
So in any case, you're not going to get much out of Rubio on it there. But I think that's a very important question, because we're a long way from Jimmy Carter selling his peanut farm in order to avoid any conflicts of interest. In fact, not only with regard to foreign government entanglements, but everybody knows the way to Donald Trump's heart is through his pocketbook. So they've been showering him with insane amounts of money, even after he wins re-election, into his campaign coffers. He can't even run again. And yet all this money, hundreds of millions of dollars, flowing into his campaign coffers, Zuckerberg and Sam Altman and all these people sucking up to him with $1 million contributions into the inauguration fund. And then obviously, the Gulf Arab states in particular, they were early movers in this direction. The thing to Jared Kushner was just a flat out bribe. We know that MBS intervened in that decision to fund him to that regard. He had been rejected by the larger council, and MBS came in over the top and was like, no, we're gonna make this one happen for him. So very legitimate line of questioning. Obviously, you don't get anything useful out of Rubio there. The other thing that was just worth a mention that Glenn Greenwald pointed out is New York Times hawks, in particular Brett Stevens, already making their move with Rubio lined up here to be Secretary of State, and he is almost certainly going to get confirmed by, I think, a large margin. I think a lot of Democrats will vote for him.
Tim Kaine's voting for him.
Yeah, I think a lot of Democrats are going to vote for him as well. But New York Times publishing an op-ed literally calling for military intervention into Venezuela to take out Maduro. We can put this up on the screen. This is B3. Donald Trump has set some grandiose foreign policy goals for a second term. They say, here's one goal that's overdue, morally right, and international security interest, deposing the regime of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela through coercive diplomacy, if possible, or force, if necessary. And he lays out the case for why we should be willing to wage a regime change war in Venezuela, something that certainly Marco Rubio would be, if anyone, it would be open to such a thing, it would be Marco Rubio.
Well, the only thing I can say is at least we have seen Donald Trump has been able to exert some influence. Rubio was singing a real different tune on Ukraine, and at least these guys know that it's not up to them in public. Behind the scenes, I have no idea. In fact, Latin America is one of the very things I warned about, because the problem is that you can only do that for stuff that you really care a lot about. But when you have somebody like that, Secretary of State in power, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I've talked about this extensively, that you have no power, that you have no interest in, right? Back burner relationship, Venezuela, whatever, who cares? So that means that's kind of default up to the Secretary of State. Now, what policy is he going to pursue? Don't forget, John Bolton and all that in the past always advocated for regime change in Venezuela. So we're all going to keep our eyes on that one, and I genuinely think that is the biggest danger area.
Yeah, and there's
Trump.
a significant constituency in favor of a bunch of these psychos.
All right, let's go to the next one. This was Pam Bondi. She's going to be